She said it on the 43rd day, in a room that smelled like antiseptic and recycled air, and the alien did not understand it. Not the words. The words were galactic standard, and Reth Anavar spoke standard well, better than well, fluently, with the precision of someone who had learned it as a professional requirement, and then exceeded the requirement by considerable distance. He understood every syllable. What he did not understand was what the words were for. "I will not leave you," said Elspeth Cairns, who was a palliative care nurse from Dundee, and who had been sitting in the chair beside his medical bay bed for 4 hours without being asked to, and who had said this in response to nothing at all, not a question, not a fear he had expressed, not a request of any kind. She had said it into the quiet of a room at 0200 station time because she was sitting there and the quiet had seemed to need something in it. Reth Anavar was Vathari. He was the Vathari ambassador to the conquered station medical complex, which meant he was also, as of 43 days ago, the Vathari patient in the medical complex's long-term care ward, following a cardiovascular incident that his species called Velanath, a phrase that translated roughly as the heart's negotiation with continuing, and that the human cardiologist on staff had described, in plainer terms, as severe and requiring extended recovery. He was 61 years old in Vathari years, which corresponded to approximately 74 in human terms, and he was by the assessment of everyone who worked with him a precise, formal, and somewhat austere individual who conducted his diplomatic duties with efficiency and his personal life with privacy, and who had been a patient for 43 days with the same efficiency and privacy he brought to everything else. He had not asked for company at 0200. He was looking at the ceiling when she said it. He turned his head to look at her instead. The Vathari face was not structured the way human faces were, broader, with a secondary jaw that was primarily used for the deeper registers of Vathari speech, and that remained mostly still during standard conversation, and eyes set wider apart than human eyes, with an iris that contracted and expanded laterally rather than circularly. His irises were currently expanded, which in Vathari physiology indicated heightened attention. "Why did you say that?" he said. Elspeth looked at him. She was 53 years old, with gray threaded through dark hair that she kept in a practical braid, and hands that showed 28 years of this work in the way that hands showed work incapable, calloused in specific places, never entirely still. "Because it's 2 in the morning and you haven't slept," she said, "and because I think you've been lying here for the last 2 hours believing that no one knows and no one is paying attention, and I wanted you to know that someone is." He was quiet for a moment. "You have been watching me not sleep," he said. "It's my job to watch," she said. "You stop watching people at night in palliative care and things go wrong." "I am not in palliative care," he said. The correction was not sharp, it was precise. He made a distinction worth making. "I'm aware," she said. "I was transferred to general long-term care for this rotation because they were short-staffed, but the habits come with me." She looked at him steadily. "Why aren't you sleeping?" Well, he turned back to the ceiling. "The Vathari," he said, after a pause that she had learned over 43 days did not mean he was deciding whether to answer but rather how accurately to answer, "do not sleep in the manner your medical staff expects. Our rest cycle is segmented. 4 periods of approximately 90 minutes distributed across a 20-hour cycle. The station's night cycle does not correspond to our biological distribution. My body expects rest at 23:00 and 04:00 and 09:00 and 14:00. The medical staff has adjusted my medication schedule for a human sleep pattern. The adjustments are incorrect." Oh, she looked at him. "Have you told them?" she said. "I have mentioned it," he said. "Mentioned it," she said. "In the context of a broader discussion of my care protocol," he said. "It was noted." "It was noted and not changed," she said. "Oh, yes." She reached for the care tablet on the bedside table. She made 3 notes in it. Her handwriting on the tablet was quick and specific. "I'm going to flag this for the morning coordinator," she said. "Your medication schedule should be adjusted to fit your actual biology, not an assumed human pattern. That should have happened on day one." She set the tablet down. "In the meantime, your 23:00 rest period was 2 hours ago. You've missed it. The 04001 is 2 hours from now. If I adjust the room settings to better support Vathari rest conditions, can you sleep between now and then?" Well, he looked at her. "Oh, you know Vathari rest conditions," he said. As I looked him up, she said, "Day 2, the file had standard humanoid defaults. I thought that seemed unlikely to be right." He was very still for a moment. "The temperature," he said, "should be 3 degrees lower than current. The light should shift to the blue spectrum setting rather than off. Vathari rest is not in full darkness, and the air circulation should be at a higher flow rate." She stood up, she made the adjustments on the room panel. She sat back down. The room changed around him, cooler, the light going to a quiet blue that he had not realized he had been missing, the air moving in a way that felt less stale. Well, he closed his eyes. "Oh, thank you," he said. "Sleep," she said, "I'll be here." He slept. He had not slept properly in 43 days, and he slept for 2 hours and 4 minutes. And when he woke, she was still there in the chair, reading something on her personal tablet with the lamp turned to its lowest setting. As he watched her for a moment before he spoke. "Oh, you stayed," he said. "I said I would," she said without looking up. He lay in the adjusted room and thought about this. He had been a diplomat for 31 years. He had represented the Vathari continuance in negotiations with 7 species across 4 contested sectors. He had signed 3 treaties that his government considered significant and 2 that he personally considered more significant, but that the historical record would likely rate as minor. He had been in those 31 years in rooms with every variety of person that high-stakes interspecies negotiation produced, the brilliant and the mediocre, the principled and the expedient, the ones who said one thing and meant another, and the much rarer ones who meant what they said. He had developed over 31 years a reliable ability to assess what a person was. He spent the next several days assessing Elspeth Cairns with the same attention he brought to diplomatic counterparts, which he was aware was both excessive, and given the circumstances, the only thing he had to do with the attention he usually spent on work. He had been told to rest. He was resting. He was resting while conducting a sustained assessment of his night nurse. What he found was this. She said what she meant, consistently, without the diplomatic qualification that he had spent 31 years both using and reading through. When she told him a procedure would be uncomfortable, it was uncomfortable. When she told him something would take a specific amount of time, it took that amount of time. When she told him she would return in an hour, she returned in an hour. He had not initially recognized this as unusual. He had not initially been paying close enough attention. It was not until the 6th day of her rotation, when the morning coordinator had changed, and the new coordinator had made an error in his medication timing that had been caught and corrected by Elspeth before his afternoon rest period, that he had begun to pay real attention. She had corrected the error without drama. She had simply come in with the correct schedule, explained the adjustment, and implemented it. She had not apologized for the error as if it were hers because it was not hers. She had not deflected responsibility for noticing it. She had found it, fixed it, documented it, and moved on. Oh, he had noted this. He had noted subsequently the way she adjusted her approach to each patient on the ward without being asked, reading what they needed from observation rather than waiting for request. The way she handled the overnight hours, the ward at 0300 had a specific quality that he had come to know in 43 days, a fragile quiet where the distance from home felt largest and the body's complaints were loudest, with a presence that was neither intrusive nor absent. She was simply there, and her being there had a weight to it. He had noted specifically that she had not, in the 6 weeks of her rotation that overlapped with his hospitalization, once told a patient something that was not true in order to make them feel better. He had seen her do the harder thing. He had seen her sit with a Garrel patient 3 beds down and tell him directly and gently and completely that the test results were not what they had hoped for. He had heard her, the ward was not soundproofed against all frequencies, and the Vathari secondary hearing range was broader than humans typically accounted for. Hold a conversation with that patient for 40 minutes that the patient's own family had apparently been unable to have. He had thought about that for a long time. On the 51st day, he asked her about it. She was making the overnight rounds and she stopped at his door when she saw he was awake. He had begun, in the 3rd week, to keep the door open at night, which he had initially attributed to the improved air circulation and had gradually come to understand was also about something else. While she came in, she sat in the chair, did not ask why he was awake because she had learned to recognize the difference between his wakeful states, the uncomfortable one, which required intervention, and the thinking one, which required only presence. The patient 3 beds down, he said. The Garrel, the conversation you had with him on day 48. Oh yes, she said. Oh, you told him the truth, he said. Oh yes. He needed to hear something that was not easy to say or to hear. His family had not been able to say it. You said it. It needed to be said, she said. He needed to know what he was dealing with so he could decide what to do with the time. She paused. People make better decisions with accurate information, even about hard things, maybe especially about hard things. Well, he thought about this. In my work, he said, the truth is frequently the most expensive thing in the room. Everyone has a truth they are protecting. The negotiation is often about which truths can be released and which cannot, and in what order and what is required in exchange. That sounds exhausting, she said. It is, he said. It is necessary and it is exhausting, and I have been doing it for 31 years. He looked at the ceiling. You do not negotiate with the truth. No, she said, it doesn't improve outcomes. I have met very few people who understand that from the inside, he said. Most people who say they believe in honesty are honest when it is convenient. You are honest when it is not. I'm honest because patients deserve it, she said. They're dealing with enough without me adding inaccuracy to the list. Yes, he said, but it costs something. I watch you. It costs something. She was quiet for a moment. Of course it does, she said. Most things worth doing do. He looked at her. The Vathari, he said slowly, have a concept. Ethsolvar, it means approximately the person who carries a weight they could put down but does not because putting it down would pass it to someone who is less able to carry it. He paused. I have not used that word about a non-Vathari before, but I have been thinking for several days that it applies to you. She looked at him with an expression he had learned to read, the specific quality of her attention when she was taking something in rather than preparing a response. I didn't know that word, she said. No, he said, I am telling you. Thank you, she said, and then after a pause, I think you're one too, Ethsolvar. I've watched you for 51 days. You don't complain. You don't request things that would require extra work. You identified an error in your care protocol and you mentioned it rather than demanding it be fixed because you were trying not to be a burden. She met his eyes. You put your own weight down when it would have been reasonable to ask for help carrying it. He was very still. I was aware that the medical staff was managing a high patient load, he said. Yes, she said, and you adjusted your own needs to accommodate their capacity, which is considerate and also in a medical context not always wise. You are telling me I should complain more, he said. I'm telling you that asking for what you need is not the same as being a burden, she said. Those are two different things. You have conflated them. He was quiet for a long time. In Vathari culture, he said, the expression of need is calibrated carefully. The Vathari continuance is a collective governance structure. The health of the collective depends on each member managing their own requirements without excessive draw on shared resources. To express need is to make a claim on others. Claims must be justified. And if the need is genuine, she said, then it must be justified genuinely, he said. But the calibration is difficult, and the habit of calibration becomes a default, even when the context does not require it. Even when you're in a hospital, she said, where expressing need is the entire point of being here. Oh yes, he said, even then. She looked at him for a moment. Reth, she said, it was the first time she had used his given name. In Vathari protocol, given names were used between people of established personal connection, and he had not established personal connection with anyone on this station outside of formal diplomatic contexts. The use of his name landed with a weight he had not expected. What is it that you actually need, she said, not what you have been willing to ask for, what you need. He looked at the ceiling. He thought about 31 years of calibrated self-sufficiency. He thought about the adjusted room settings, cooler, blue light, higher airflow, and how he had gone 43 days without them because mentioning it had seemed like a claim he was not certain was justified. He thought about the Garrel patient and the 40-minute conversation and the truth that had needed to be said. I do not know how to be ill, he said. I know how to function und. Difficulty, I know how to continue working when conditions are suboptimal. I know how to manage discomfort without disruption to my responsibilities. I do not know how to be a person who is ill and has no responsibilities to manage and whose only task is to recover. He stopped. It is an unfamiliar state. I find it more disorienting than the illness itself. She was quiet for a moment. That's the most honest thing you've said to me in 51 days, she said. Oh yes, he said. Thank you, she said. I should have, he stopped. Oh, you said it now, she said, that's enough. She brought him something on the 55th day. It was not part of her duties. She came in on a morning when she was not on shift, in her own clothes rather than her uniform, carrying a small bag, and she knocked on the door of his room though it was open. He was sitting up, which he had been doing more reliably since the medication schedule had been corrected. He looked at her and then at the bag. You are not working today, he said. No, she said, I'm on my day off. She set the bag on the table beside his bed. I went to the market on level 6. I looked up Vathari food preferences last week and I had a question I wanted to ask you. He looked at the bag. The Vathari, she said, have a significant tradition around what your reference texts call Velesen, communal food preparation, and eating as a form of the translation gives several options. Social bonding, grief processing, celebration, daily maintenance of relationship. I couldn't find a single English word that covered all of them, so I'm using the Vathari one. She opened the bag. The specific preparation I looked up is the one associated with recovery from illness. It involves a grain base with 3 specific mineral supplements and a slow cooking method that the reference described as requiring patience and attention. She looked at him. I don't know if I've done it correctly. I've never cooked Vathari food before, but I tried and I thought you might want to assess it. He looked at the container she had produced from the bag. He recognized it. He recognized the smell of it, the specific combination of the mineral supplements and the grain, the slow-cooked quality that the reference had apparently described accurately enough for her to achieve it. He had not smelled that smell in 55 days. He had not smelled it, in fact, since the last time his sister had made it for him, which was before the posting to Concord Station, which was 14 months ago. He was quiet for long enough that he became aware of the quality of his own silence. The preparation, he said carefully, is called Anvel. It is made for someone who is recovering. The name means approximately the meal that says you are expected to continue. She looked at him. That's what I was hoping it meant, she said. The translation was ambiguous. As he looked at the container, he looked at her. You spent your day off, he said. I had time, she said. Elspeth, he said. It was the first time he had used her name. She looked at him with the specific quality of attention that was hers specifically, the one that meant she was receiving something fully rather than waiting for her turn to speak. Why? Because you're away from home and you've been ill for 55 days and you are trying very hard not to need anything, and someone should make you something that says you are expected to continue. She looked at him steadily. That seemed like a thing worth doing on a day off. He looked at her for a long time. The Vathari, he said, have a practice around Anvel. It is made by someone in your Vel Soreth. The word does not have a direct standard translation. It means something like the people who are bound to you not by obligation or proximity but by choice and accumulation. The ones who have chosen over time to be part of the fabric of your life. Vel Soreth, she said. Yes, he said, it is not a word for family exactly. Family is an obligation of origin. Vel Soreth is it is chosen. It accumulates through specific acts, through showing up. He looked at the container. The making of Anvel for someone is among the Vathari. It is an act that belongs to Vel Soreth. It is not typically done by strangers. She was quiet for a moment. I don't think I'm a stranger anymore, she said, after 55 days. No, he said, you are not. Ate the Anvel. She sat with him while he did. The preparation was not identical to his sister's version. The grain ratio was slightly different, and the mineral supplement she had found for one of the three was an analog rather than the original compound, which shifted the flavor in a subtle way, but it was close. It was recognizably the thing it was trying to be, and it had been made with the patience and attention that the method required, and that he thought was the larger part of what Anvel was. When he finished he set the container down. My sister, he said, makes it with more of the third supplement, a stronger mineral note. I have always preferred her version to the standard preparation. Tell me the ratio, she said. He looked at her. So I can make the right version next time, she said. He told her. She was transferred back to palliative care in week 10. The staffing situation had resolved and the long-term care ward had returned to its regular roster, which did not include Elspeth Cairns. He was informed of this by the morning coordinator, not by Elspeth herself, which meant he had one shift's notice before her rotation ended. He did not say anything about it that shift. He thanked the care coordinator for the information, and he managed the 43-minute period between learning it and Elspeth's appearance for the evening rounds with the same efficiency he brought to managing difficult information in diplomatic contexts. She came in for rounds, she did his evening assessment, she made her notes. She had not said anything about the transfer. He waited until she had finished her notes. You are returning to palliative care tomorrow, he said. She looked up. Yes, she said, the regular long-term care team is back. I was covering. She looked at him steadily. You've known for a few hours. Since the morning coordinator told me. And you waited all day to say something. I was deciding what to say, he said. She sat down, not with her usual immediate ease, with the quality of deliberateness she had that meant she knew the conversation was going to require her full weight behind it. Wrath, she said. I have been a diplomat for 31 years, he said. I know how to accept transitions. I know how to manage the end of a professional relationship with appropriate acknowledgement and without excessive attachment. He looked at his hands. I find that the skills are not transferring as expected in this particular instance. She was quiet. I will complete my recovery, he said. I am told another 3 to 4 weeks. The care team is competent. The situation is medically straightforward. He stopped. These are the relevant facts. I am aware that these are the relevant facts. Wrath, she said again gently. I do not have a framework, he said, for what you have been for these 10 weeks. The Vathari have Velsoreth, which I described to you, but Velsoreth implies a continuity and ongoing relationship. You are returning to your ward. I am returning to my posting in 3 to 4 weeks. The situation does not support continuity. He looked at the ceiling. I am finding that I do not have the vocabulary for this. She was very still. You've given me several Vathari words, she said. Over 10 weeks. Eth Salvar, Anvel, Vel Soreth, you've taught me things my species doesn't have language for. Oh yes, he said. I think this might be one of those times when your language has something mine doesn't, she said. Or it might be the reverse. She looked at him. In Scots Gaelic, my grandmother's language, not mine, I only have pieces of it. There's a word, duthches. It means it's complicated. It means the connection between a person and the place and people that made them. The sense that you belong to something and it belongs to you, not ownership, belonging. She paused. But there's another word, cardias. It means friendship, but it's not the same as the English word. It means the specific kind of bond between people who have been through something together, who have sat in the difficult hours. She looked at him. I think we have cardias. He repeated the word. His Vathari accent reshaped it, but the intent was clear and she heard it. Cardias does not require continuity, he said. No, she said, it's not about how long or how often, it's about the quality of what happened. She met his eyes. The difficult hours happened, the Anvel happened, you told me you didn't know how to be ill, I told you asking for what you need isn't the same as being a burden. She was steady. Those things don't go away when I transfer back to my ward. He was quiet for a long time. The Vathari Velsoreth, he said slowly, does not require geographic proximity. It is the definition I gave you was incomplete, I gave you the surface of it. He paused. The fuller definition is those who have chosen you and whom you have chosen across whatever distance over time. The ongoing choice is the thing, not the closeness. Then we might have that too, she said. He looked at her. I would like, he said carefully, to send you the correct formulation of the Anvel preparation. The one with my sister's ratios, in written form so you have it. I would like that, she said. And I would like, he said more slowly, to know when I have recovered and returned to my posting that the channel is open, that I can send the Anvel formulation and that you might eventually send something back. Oh, that's right. E smiled. He had learned to read it, not the documentation smile, but the specific one that was hers, which lived in the corners of her eyes more than in her mouth. The channel is open, she said. 3 weeks later, he was discharged. The final assessment was conducted by the cardiologist, who was satisfied, and countersigned by the long-term care coordinator, who was thorough, and noted in the file by the nursing staff, who were professional. The process took 4 hours and produced 6 documents and a medication management plan that had been correctly calibrated for Vathari biology since week 2, when Elspeth's flag had produced the adjustment. He packed his things. He had accumulated more things than he had arrived with, the reference text she had given him when he mentioned wanting to understand the Scots Gaelic fragments better, the small notes from the night rounds that were not clinical and that he had kept because they were not clinical, the Anvel formulation with his sister's ratios in Elspeth's handwriting on the back of a medication schedule. He said goodbye to the ward staff. He was correct and appropriate and warm in the Vathari manner, which was different from the human manner but legible. He went to palliative care. Elspeth was in the middle of the day shift. He waited outside the ward entrance until she came to the desk for a chart update. She saw him through the window. She said something to the colleague beside her and came out. They were in the corridors. You're discharged, she said. An hour ago, he said. How do you feel? Adequately well, he said. And then, because he had been learning in 10 weeks to answer that question more accurately, better than I expected to feel. The last week has been better than the weeks before it. Good, she said. He had thought about what to say here. He had prepared several versions of it over the previous 3 days and had discarded each of them because they were not accurate enough. And accuracy had become, in 10 weeks, a value he was not willing to sacrifice for the comfort of a cleaner sentence. I told you, he said, that I did not have a word for what you had been for these 10 weeks. Oh yes, she said. I have been working on this problem, he said. Diplomatically, the way I work on language problems, which is to say, I have been examining both languages and looking for the existing vocabulary before considering whether new vocabulary is required. Oh, she looked at him. Velsoreth is the closest Vathari word, he said, but as I said, its full meaning requires ongoing choice across distance. I intend to fulfill that requirement, so I believe the word applies but is not complete on its own. He paused. Your word Cardias addresses the bond formed in difficult hours. I believe that applies and is also not complete on its own. Another pause. In my 31 years of diplomatic work, I have learned that the most accurate descriptions of complex realities are usually compound. No single term is sufficient. You use multiple terms in conjunction. Velsorath and Cardias, she said. Yes, he said, and one more, which I did not take from either of our languages because neither of our languages had it. She waited. On day 43, he said, you said to me, I will not leave you. You said it without being asked into a quiet room at 0200. I asked you why you had said it, and you told me it was because you thought I had been lying there believing no one was paying attention, and you wanted me to know someone was. Oh yes, she said. I did not have a word for that, he said, for the specific act of announcing presence without being asked for it, of saying, I see that you believe yourself to be alone and I want you to know that the belief is incorrect. He looked at her steadily. I have been trying to find this word in every language I know. I have not found it. I am going to have to make it. What is it? She said. I don't have it fully yet, he said. I am still building it. It takes time to build a word that is true. He paused. But the meaning is clear. The meaning is the act of naming your presence so that someone who has forgotten they are not alone remembers. The corridor was very quiet. That's a good meaning, she said. It is a meaning that was missing, he said. From every language I could consult, it seems important. It seems like a thing that should have had a word already and did not, and that you performed it anyway without the word means that the act preceded the language, which is how the necessary words are usually born. She looked at him. When you build it, she said, will you tell me what it is? You will be the first to know, he said. It seems appropriate given that you are the reason it needs to exist. He returned to his posting. The diplomatic work resumed. The negotiations he had left unfinished were taken up again with the specific quality of resumed attention that came from returning to a problem after a significant interval, seeing it fresh, noticing things he had not noticed before, finding that the pause had been a kind of work in itself. He messaged his sister on the first evening back. He told her about the Anvel formulation, that a human nurse had made it for him during his recovery, that she had looked up the preparation and spent her day off attempting it, that it had not been precisely his sister's version but had been unmistakably the right thing. His sister was quiet for a moment in the video call and then said, in Vathari, something that he did not translate for Elspeth when he described the conversation later, because some things belonged to the language they were said in, but which meant approximately. She is Vel Soreth, you know this. Oh, he knew this. He messaged Elspeth 3 weeks after returning. He sent her the Anvel formulation with the correct ratios, as he had promised, with a note about the specific mineral supplement that was harder to source, but that made the difference in the third note of the flavor. She sent back a photograph 10 days later of the preparation she had made. The photo was slightly blurry, she was not a precise photographer, but the preparation itself was clearly correct. The ratios were right, she had sourced the correct supplement. Below the photo she had written, "Is this the right third note?" He looked at the photograph for a long time. He wrote back, "Yes, that is exactly right." In the sixth month after his discharge, he was in a negotiation session that had been running for 11 hours, and that had reached the specific kind of impasse that 11-hour negotiation sessions reached when both parties were exhausted and beginning to protect positions they had already privately agreed to concede. He called a recess. He stepped out into the corridor. He sent a message. It was not the time for a message. It was late on the station, past midnight by the Concord station clock that he still kept on his secondary display out of habit. But he sent it because he had learned, in 10 weeks in a hospital room and the months following, that the precise time was rarely as important as the fact of the message. He wrote, "In a negotiation that has been going for 11 hours, both parties are exhausted. The impasse is artificial. We both know what we are going to agree to. I find that I am more patient with the artificial impasse than I used to be. I am not certain whether this is wisdom or fatigue." She wrote back in 7 minutes, which meant she was awake, which he had known was possible and not certain, and had sent the message anyway. She wrote, "That sounds like wisdom wearing the mask of fatigue so it doesn't seem presumptuous. You know what they're going to agree to. You're giving them the time to get there without feeling hurried. That's not impasse management, that's care." He stood in the corridor of the negotiation complex and read this. As he went back into the room, he managed the remaining 2 hours of the session with what his diplomatic counterpart later described in a debrief message as unusual warmth for this late in a session. The agreement was reached. The terms were what both parties had known they would be for approximately 4 hours. The time had been necessary anyway. He wrote to Elspeth afterward, "You were right, it was wisdom." She wrote back, "It usually is when it feels like the harder choice." The word came to him 7 months after his discharge. He was not looking for it. He was reading one of the Scots Gaelic reference texts she had pointed him toward, working through it slowly with a translation aid because the language was not one he knew, and he found that learning it, even partially, helped him understand the pieces of it she sometimes sent. He was reading about the concept of la abuin, the harvest day, and the communal nature of it. The idea that the work of gathering was done together because no single person should carry the weight of the whole field alone. Well, he stopped. Well, he sat with it. The word that had been missing was not about harvest, but it was about the same principle, the act of showing up to help carry a weight that is not yours by obligation, but that you have chosen to help carry because the person carrying it should not be alone with it. And in the middle of that thought, the word arrived. Not from Vathari, not from Scots Gaelic or English or any of the 7 languages he had professional fluency in. It arrived as words sometimes did, in the space between languages where the meaning lives before it finds its form. He wrote it down in the notation system he used for diplomatic language work, a phonetic system that could represent any sound in any language he knew. He looked at it. Oh, he sent a message. "I have the word, are you available to speak?" She replied in 4 minutes, "Yes, call me." He called, she answered, and she was in what he had learned to recognize as her home, the Backer. Sound quality of it, the specific ambient sound of where she was when she was not at the station. Tell me," she said. "The word," he said, "for the act of naming your presence to someone who has forgotten they are not alone." He paused. "In the Vathari notation it is written Velantha Kareth. I am aware that the first 2 elements sound like other Vathari words you know. Vel appears in both Vel Soreth and Velantha Soren, the Lethani word you showed me in the paper you sent." She had sent him papers. He read them. The most recent had been about a Lethani bioluminescent pattern and its meaning by a student named Pressy, which had included a discussion of something she called Velantha Soren that had stayed with him. The vel, he said, in Vathari-based language means the light that is present before you know what it illuminates. The first light. Antha is the act of choosing. Karath is the specific word for the announcement of one's presence, not the presence itself, but the naming of it. The saying of I am here. She was quiet on the other end of the call. Velantha Karath, she said. The light that chooses to say, I am here. He paused. It is the act of speaking your presence into a room where someone has started to believe the room is empty, of choosing to illuminate. She was quiet for long enough that he checked the connection. Elspeth, he said. I'm here, she said. Her voice had the quality he had learned in 10 weeks of night shifts, the specific register that meant something was moving through her that was too large for the sentence she was currently in. She stopped. That's the right word. I believe so, he said. Oh, it took you 7 months, she said. Important words take time, he said. You cannot rush the ones that are filling a gap that has always been there. The gap has weight. The word has to be strong enough to hold it. Velantha Karath, she said again, precisely. Her Scottish accent reshaping the Vathari sounds into something that was not quite his language and not quite hers. Oh yes, he said, that is it. Will you send me the notation, she said. Already sending, he said. She made a sound that he had learned in the months of messages and calls was specific to her, short and warm. The sound of something landing right. Wrath, she said. Oh yes. On day 43 at 2 in the morning, she said, I said I would not leave you. And you asked me why, and I told you it was because I wanted you to know someone was paying attention. Oh yes, he said. I want you to know, she said, that I still am. He sat in his study on Vathari Continuance Station with the notation in his hand and the call open and the Velantha Karath. The light that chooses to say it is there, present in the space between them across whatever distance the stations were from each other tonight, which he did not know precisely and which did not matter. I know, he said, I am still paying attention also. The call stayed open for another hour. They talked about the negotiation and the harvest day and his sister's Anne Vel, and a new patient she had on the palliative ward whose case she was thinking through and needed to say aloud to someone who would listen without judgment. He listened without judgment. She listened to his negotiation. When they said good night, it was late on both stations, probably, and neither of them remarked on it because the lateness was not the point. He put down the notations. Velantha Karath. The word for the things that had been missing. The word for what she had been doing without a word for it, since the 43rd day in a room that smelled of antiseptic and recycled air when she said into the quiet, I will not leave you. He wrote it into his diplomatic language reference, the working document he had maintained for 31 years, where he kept the words that mattered, the ones that carried more than their translations suggested. He added the Scots Gaelic words she had given him. He added the Lethani word from the paper. He added Velantha Karath last. Beside it in the notation column where he kept context, he wrote the only context that was accurate, born from an act that preceded it. 55 days in a ward on Concord Station. A person who named her presence before the word existed to describe it. He closed the document. The station was quiet. The work would resume tomorrow. The word was built and it was strong and it would hold. Oh, he slept. Thank you, that's all I want to say first. Just thank you for being here for this one. Some stories are about the moment of crisis and some are about the long quiet afterward and some are about the 7 months it takes to find a word for something that was already true before the word existed. This is the third kind. If you felt something in the last few minutes that you didn't have a name for yet, sit with it. The right word will come. It usually does when you've found the right person to build it with. Subsk. Ribe if you want more of these. Leave a comment, tell me which line you'll carry. I read every one. Until next time, be someone's Velantha Kareth. Name your presence. Say that you are there.